be starting with our first Dr. Karan Singh Chauhan. He will be talking about the retrobulbar amphotericin B in the post-COVID mucormycosis. You can share your screen, Doctor. Karan, Dr. Karan, you can share the screen.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Make it full screen, please.
Good afternoon, all of you.
Hi.
Good afternoon, all of you. My name is Karan Singh Chauhan. My topic is retrobulbar amphotericin B in ocular manifestation of post-COVID-19 cyanoorbital mucormycosis, which is presented under the guidance of Dr. Dheeraj Balvi, Dr. Munal Patil, Dr. Kalpana Gadsing, and Dr. Swapnil Vidati. This is a cyanoorbital cerebral mucormycosis is an uncommon life-threatening invasive fungal infection caused by fungus belonging to order Mucorales. The condition originates in nasal region and paranasal sinuses, but often suspected following orbital spread, explaining its poor prognosis. Depending on location of infection, mucormycosis can be cyanoorbital, cerebral, pulmonary, gastrointestinal, cutaneous, or disseminated. Fungus destroys the surrounding bone and soft tissue through vascular thrombosis and subsequent tissue infarction, and may reach the brain with fatal complication. The risk factor for mucormycosis is a critically ill patient who have undergone invasive procedures, who are having uncontrolled diabetes, who are exposed to the long-term corticosteroid therapy and long-standing oxygen therapy, which was most common in COVID-19 pandemic. COVID-19 causes cytokine storm, thrombotic inflammatory response, and microvascular coagulopathies, which causes dysregulated immunological response in patients who are having uncontrolled diabetes and who are exposed to the long-term corticosteroid therapy and oxygen therapy. So, causing mucormycosis in these patients. Aims and objective of my paper is to study the effects of retrobulbar amphotericin B in ocular manifestation of post-COVID-19 mucormycosis and to study different treatment modalities of post-COVID-19 mucormycosis. I have included a case of mucormycosis with orbital involvement and previous history of COVID-19 infection, which was confirmed on KOH mount, suggestive of fungal elements and radiological finding explaining orbital extent. I have excluded case of mucormycosis without any orbital involvement or no history of COVID-19 infection. And KOH mount reports suggestive of absence of fungal elements and radiological findings suggestive of no orbital extent. I have included 5 patients and all patients underwent detailed examination and assessment included visual acuity, refraction, slit lamp examination, fundus examination, lab investigation like KOH mount and radiological investigation like CT-PNS orbit and MRI brain orbit. My first case, 40-year-old female came with a complaint of left eye pain and swelling and drooping of upper eyelid. She has having previous history of COVID-19. No other history of systemic illness. She was exposed to the corticosteroid during the COVID-19 treatment for 14 days, and visual acuity of left eye was finger counting 1 meter on presentation. Our movements were restricted, pupil was made dilated, proptosis were present, fundus was within normal limit, but diagnosis confirmed on KOH mount, which was positive, and MRI findings, which were suggestive of erosion in medial wall of left orbit and fats standing in left or retroorbital space. This is a clinical picture of that patient, which was showing left eye proptosed, chemosed, and mid-dilated pupil with correlative MRI findings suggestive of erosion in left medial wall of left orbit. After extensive discussion with the patient elected to proceed with the amphotericin B deoxycholate retrobulbar injection and provided informed consent for its application. Retrobulbar injection consisted of 1 ml of 3.5 mg per ml amphotericin B with antecedent retrobulbar injection of anesthetic were delivered to the left retroorbital space. The patient also started on intravenous liposomal amphotericin B with 50 mg every 24 hours and oral posaconazole tablet with 200 mg every 24 hours in conjunction with functional endoscopic sinus surgery. After retrobulbar Retrobulbar administration, visual improved to 660, minimization of osmosis and extraocular movements and mild ptosis. MRI demonstrated no significant changes as compared to the previous reports. After 1 month of follow-up, the visual acuity improved to 624 with mild ptosis. This is a clinical picture of a patient of image data with duration of 1 month and MRI finding with no significant changes as compared to previous reports. Subsequently, case 2, 3, 4, and 5 were examined. Detailed history were taken. Duration of COVID-19 treatment with corticosteroid was noted. Ocular examination noted with visual acuity, ocular movements, pupil reaction, proptosis, and diagnosis confirmed on KOH mount and MRI finding, and also adjunctive treatments such as FACE or functional endoscopic sinus surgery were also noted. After retrobulbar amphotericin B, the prognostic factors were included in this study, with which are visual acuity, ocular proptosis, and MRI finding. All these 4 cases showed no significant changes or progression on MRI findings, with slight improvement in visual acuity and pupillary reaction. These are the clinical pictures of the patients with improvement showing before administration of retrobulbar and after administration of retrobulbar. Amphotericin B is a polyene antifungal, acts by binding ergosterol component of cell membrane, forming pores that leads to loss of cations and eventual cell death, which leads to cytotoxicity. Faced with progressive disease on maximal systemic medication and after sinus debridement, retrobulbar antifungal treatment was selected as a non-surgical option to potentially halt the orbital extension. After administration of retrobulbar amphotericin in our patient, orbital progression halted with no significant MRI finding were noted. Although definitive cause and effect relationship cannot be ascertained, so further studies will need to be undertaken to establish a definitive correlation. However, retrobulbar antifungal injection is a viable option to consider an opportunity to avoid exenteration and spare the eye. Immediate initiation of IV antifungals and reversing the patient's immunocompromised state and endoscopic surgical debridement are the basis of the treatment of mucormycosis. But in presence of progressive orbital disease, retrobulbar amphotericin B treatment should be considered as an adjunctive prior to exenteration. The references I have taken for this as follows, and I'll conclude this topic. This is all about my paper present.
Good, very good. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Dr.
Yes, sir.
Chavan, you have studied very nicely.
Yes,
Can
sir.
you say me how do you collect the specimen? By endonasal or approach is by which route to collect the specimen for KOH fixation?
Sir, for KOH fixation, I have taken endonasal route. Swab were taken from endonasal.
Very nice.
Yes.
So by giving
Any
the
questions?
epitocin, can we avoid the exenteration in future? I mean, what will be the fate of the patient if you do the retrobulbar amphotericin and patient get relief? Shall we stop for that stage, or should we go for the exenteration and surgical intervention?
No, sir. To avoid exenteration and to stop the orbital progression, we can advise amphotericin, retrobulbar amphotericin B, as it causes a local cytotoxic effect, and it acts on angio-invasive nature of fungus, which limits the function of systemic antifungal. That's why local antifungal is prepared. Retrobulbar and amphotericin B is a good option.
Good, very nice. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Any questions from Pakre, sir?
No question.
Okay, okay. Right. So we will move on to the next presentation, and that is by Dr. Karishma Tendulkar. Ma'am, you can please share your screen. It is to assess the effects of glycemic control and outcomes of rhino-orbital cerebral mucormycosis.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Karishma, can you please share the screen?
Yes, sir.
I request next presenter to be ready and immediately share the screen after the presenting talk is done.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Karishma Tendulkar, and I'll be presenting a paper on the effects of glycemic control in the outcomes of rhinoorbital cerebral mucormycosis. Mucormycosis is an opportunistic fungal infection, especially known to affect immunocompromised individuals, especially those who have uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, malignancies, and organ transplant recipients. This disease is associated with a very high mortality rate of more than 50%. The incidence of ROCM has increased drastically in the COVID-19 pandemic. According to literature, diabetes mellitus has been the most common risk factor associated with mucormycosis in India. This study aims to highlight the effects of glycemic control on the outcomes of patients with ROCM during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Hello.
Karishma, you're not audible.
Hello. Hello.
Yeah.
Not getting
she is
audio.
with- Yeah, no, nobody's getting audio, sir. Actually, some problem with her internet connection, I suppose. Dr. Karishma, can you hear us? Can I request technical team to stop her presentation so we can go to the next?
Hello.
Takalka sir, there is some problem with her internet.
Yeah. Okay. Let us hope.
So we'll go to the next. Yeah. So I request Dr. Tejal Gujar. Dr. Tejal Gujar is here.
Yes, sir.
Kindly share your presentation. So we'll go ahead with our presentation. And now, since one of the judges could not join, Dr. Pankaj Shah sir, who is the treasurer of MOS, has joined as a third judge for the presentation. Very welcome, sir.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Sumit. Good afternoon, all of you. All the best.
Sir, we have heard one presentation, and then we are going to the second one. There are some technical issues. Dr. Tejal, you can share your presentation, please.
Yes, sir. So can you hear me?
Yes.
We can.
So is the presentation visible?
Not at all.
So it's not seen?
Stop. No. Stop sharing and try again.
Okay.
Hello.
So are you able to see now?
No, we are not getting the video.
So the screen presentation is not visible?
No, we are not able
Not
to see your
visible.
presentation, Dr. Tejal.
We are not also getting.
Then should we request another presenter, Dr. Sanjana Chipre? Dr. Sanjana, are you there? Dr. Sanjana? We'll have to move down the lane. Dr. Dhananjay? Dr. Tejal, are you trying to share the screen? It's not happening. Any issues?
Yes,
Technical team, can you help her with the presentation?
So I've shared my screen. If it is visible, I'll start.
No, I think you need to just leave and join again and try
Exactly.
to.
So I'll do
Quit
that.
Zoom and restart Zoom, madam. It will be
Yes, sir. I'll do that.
So,
Dr. Sumit? Hello?
yes, sir. I'm there, sir. Yes.
Yeah, we are not getting the audio. So now I'm getting audio, but not video.
Sir, I'm trying to connect to the next speaker so they can share the screen, sir. Just give me 2 minutes. I'll get back, sir.
Sir,
Yes.
so
Now
this is Tejal. Can you see the screen now, sir?
No, we are not seeing. Dr.
Actually,
Tejal.
screen is visible.
Yeah.
Your presentation is
Yeah, it
visible.
is visible. Yeah, it's visible.
Visible, it's visible.
Okay.
Make
sir.
it to slideshow and start it now.
Yes, sir. So I'll start the presentation now. Good afternoon, respected judges and everyone. Today I'll be presenting a case report, rare into rarer, lacrimal gland tumors. I have no financial interest. Lacrimal gland tumors are rare orbital tumors with an incidence of 1 in 1 million patients. They constitute 10% of all orbital space-occupying lesions. They are divided into epithelial and non-epithelial tumors, epithelial constituting 25% and 45% of all epithelial tumors are malignant. Pleomorphic adenoma is the most common benign tumor, while adenoid cystic carcinoma is the most common malignant lesion of the lacrimal gland. Moving on to the case report, a 65-year-old male patient came to our OPD with painless progressive swelling in the left eye. He gave history of primary swelling of the left eye in 2004, 10 years ago, for which excision biopsy was done. Histopathology was suggestive of pleomorphic adenoma. 10 years later, he gave a history of first recurrence, and after 1 year after that, second recurrence of the tumor. For both, excision biopsy was done. Then he presented with rapid growth of the lesion post-surgery, for which incisional biopsy was suggestive of myoepithelial carcinoma. On ocular examination, patient had a right eye vision of 20/20 with right eye normal, left eye PL positive vision with PR defective, with abaxial proptosis of 9 millimeters in the left eye. Pupil was semi-dilated, showing anisocoria. Extraocular muscles were restricted in all gazes, and fundus examination was suggestive of retinal and choroidal folds. CT scan imaging of the patient with contrast was suggestive of irregular isodense heterogeneous mass in the superotemporal quadrant of the left eye orbit with involvement of all extraocular muscles with optic nerve and intraconal extension up to the orbital nucleus. Dilatation of the superior orbital fissure and erosion was seen with severe thinning of the orbital roof. Post-contrast Hounsfield unit was almost double that of pre-contrast, which is suggestive of high vascularity of the tumor. Histopathological findings of the tumor showed a tan-colored tumor with areas of central hemorrhage and calcification, with tumor being present at the surgical margins of excision. It is suggestive of myoepithelial carcinoma, showing biphasic proliferation of the outer epithelial and inner myoepithelial cells, forming duct-like structures. The remainder of the tumor was suggestive of pleomorphic adenoma. The patient underwent a combined surgery with neurosurgery and ophthalmology, with a lid-sparing orbital exentration and craniotomy done. Complete removal of the mass along with the involved orbital roof was achieved. The samples were sent for histopathology and confirmed to be myoepithelial carcinoma. The patient then underwent external beam radiation therapy with 60 Gray unit and 30 divided cycles. PET scan done was within normal limit. No recurrence of the tumor was seen 2 years post radiation therapy. This is a post-operative photo of the patient. Lacrimal gland tumors are divided into epithelial and non-epithelial tumors. Epithelial divided into benign and malignant, with pleomorphic adenoma being the most common benign tumor and adenoid cystic carcinoma being most common malignant tumor. Pleomorphic adenoma has a recurrence rate of as high as 30%, but less than 10% undergoes malignant transformation. Myoepithelial tumors, more common in the salivary glands, but can arise de novo or from benign myoepithelioma or from pre-existing pleomorphic adenoma of the lacrimal gland. First myoepithelial carcinoma of the lacrimal gland was reported by Herrera et al. Dardick et al. In 1989 classified myoepithelial tumors as solid, myxoid, reticular, mixed types with cellular subtypes of spindle cell, plasmacytoid, clear cell, and mixed type. 1990, the first case of myoepithelial tumor was diagnosed by Herrera, after which 16 cases of myoepithelial carcinoma have been diagnosed till date, out of which 5 cases were presenting from old pleomorphic adenoma and 5 cases arrived de novo. Some were mixed with adenoid cystic carcinoma. 4 patients underwent exentration and 2 patients out of this underwent external beam radiation therapy. 2 patients showed a recurrence but these patients had not received the radiation therapy. In conclusion, complete excision and follow-up of the benign lacrimal tumors, especially pleomorphic adenoma, is very important. Frequent recurrence of the tumor and rapid increase in size of the tumor should raise a suspicion of benign tumor converting into malignant.
Excuse me, doctor.
Patient doesn't
Complete excision followed by radiation therapy has a good prognosis in aggressive malignant tumors like amyoepithelial carcinoma. These are my references. Thank you.
Excellent presentation, doctor.
Thank you, sir.
You can stop sharing the screen, Dr. Tejal. Yes, over to you, Takaka, sir.
How much specimen, I mean, how much patient you have collected?
So this was just one patient who had come to us in our OPD.
Hmm. So on a single patient you have studied,
Yes, sir.
and your conclusion is with a single study on a single patient.
So the histopathology was suggestive of myoepithelial carcinoma. That is why we came to the conclusion.
Excellent study. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Pakre sir, Pankaj sir, any questions?
Yeah. In which cases you avoid incision biopsy of lacrimal gland? Can you get the question, Tejal?
Sir, can you please repeat the question?
In which cases do you avoid incisional biopsy of lacrimal glands? Any cases where you avoid the biopsy, doing biopsy of lacrimal glands?
Sir, if the involvement of the gland is in gland dermoid, so lacrimal gland dermoid.
Biopsy, excision biopsy.
Yes, sir.
What are the instructions you generally give prior to the radiation to the patients? When you radiate the orbit, what are the instructions are given prior?
So we'll have to do a retinal checkup of the patient, fundoscopic examination of the patient, and the radiation therapy might induce dry eye. So we'll have to give
Yeah.
tear substitutes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Dr. Tendulkar, any questions from Pakre sir? Pakre sir, any questions?
No question, no question.
Okay. So we'll move on to the next presentation, and Dr. Karishma is back here. Dr. Karishma, you're there?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Will you be able to present?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
So
please share
I'll
your
begin
slides.
from where I'd stopped last time from the results.
Yeah, that would be better. Yeah.
Okay. So my results are as follows. 70% of the patients were male patients. Most of the patients came in the 51 to 60 year category. The patients with post-COVID infection were 80%. Only 16% had a concurrent COVID infection. All the patients were treated with systemically with antifungals, while TRAM was given in 22 patients and exenteration was done in 12 patients. 74%, that's 37 out of 50 patients, had type 2 diabetes, where the mean blood glucose level was 202.3 and the mean HbA1c value was 9.76. Interestingly, out of these 37 patients, 14 patients, that's almost 37.83%, were newly diagnosed diabetics who were diagnosed with type 2 diabetes during their COVID illness and were started on treatment thereafter. In our study, an HbA1c value of 6.5% or higher was considered as a cutoff for diagnosing uncontrolled diabetes. So out of the 37 with diabetes, 28 patients, that's 75.67%, had a poor glycemic control. And out of these, 10 patients were exenterated. A total of 12 were exenterated in the study. And out of these 10 patients, that's almost 83%, had poor glycemic control. There were 2 patients who showed cavernous sinus extension, and both these patients had a poor glycemic control. 3 patients eventually succumbed to the illness. So mucormycosis, as we know, is an opportunistic fungal infection which is caused by fungi that have a unique capability of angioinvasion, causing vasculitis and mycotic thrombosis, eventually resulting in an ischemic necrosis of the tissues. COVID-19, which was caused by the SARS-CoV-2 virus, was mainly a respiratory illness which gained a global pandemic status by 2020. Most of these patients also suffered from many opportunistic bacterial and fungal infections. There are many studies which were done following, which showed what were the factors that facilitated the growth of mucorales in COVID-19 patients. Mainly, they were related with hypoxia, hyperglycemic state, and acidic medium, either due to metabolic acidosis or diabetic ketoacidosis. High iron levels, which was seen with hyperglycemic states, wherein the iron binding capacity of transferrin and ferritin was reduced, and thereby the free iron was increased, and also a decline in the immune status and an increase in the inflammatory mediators like cytokines. So diabetes has been the most common risk factor in most of these studies. Interestingly, as I said before, most of these patients were non-diabetic, and Mueller et al. In their study had postulated that the human pancreas could have been a possible target for the SARS-CoV-2 virus, which is why some of these patients were newly diagnosed with diabetes. In our study, 37 out of the 50 patients were diabetics, out of which 14 were newly diagnosed. In a systemic review done by John et al., diabetes was reported in 93% of cases. Murthy et al. Reported the association of COVID with uncontrolled diabetes and usage of corticosteroids. Also, in a study by Sen et al., 6 patients with mucormycosis all 6 patients had diabetes, and out of these, 3 had diabetic ketoacidosis. In a study by Sarkar et al., 10 diabetic patients with ROCM were studied, and all of them had uncontrolled uncontrolled blood sugar levels. These findings were consistent with our study findings. This study had a small sample size and a short period of study with a limited geographical localization, and we could not assess the strength of association because of the absence of a control group. So to conclude, the presence of diabetes, which results in an immunosuppressive state, appears to play a major role in the rise of mucormycosis, and being an aggressive infection with a low prognostic outcome, it is especially important to adequately manage the diabetes so as to reduce the morbidity and the mortality associated with mucormycosis. Thank you.
Very good presentation, Dr. Karishma.
Thank you, sir.
So what is the line of treatment if the patient is having uncontrolled diabetes and mucormycosis? How it differs with the normal treatment of the patient of mucormycosis who is not having diabetes?
So it doesn't, basically we need to concurrently manage both the conditions, because both of them individually can be extremely dangerous for the patient. So management of the sugar levels by giving appropriate management with insulin or oral hypoglycemic agents, and at the same time managing the mucormycosis with systemic antifungals, that is amphotericin B. And as indicated, if TRAM is necessary or if the patient is progressing, which can be noted on radiological evidence, the patient should be taken up for exenteration if needed.
Okay, very nice.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sir.
Dr. Karishma,
Yes, sir.
have you seen any mucor patients in normal blood sugar levels also?
Yes,
Have you
sir.
come across?
Yes, sir.
And
There
which
had.
was different?
Yes, sir. There were a few patients. So as I said in our study, only there were 70% of the patients were diabetics, but the other 30% were non-diabetics. And so it's not, as most of these studies have said, that there's no one particular risk factor. It's a multiple risk factors which can lead to mucormycosis. So COVID-19, some patients only with COVID had mucormycosis. There were some who were treated with corticosteroids, and these patients had mucormycosis even in the absence of diabetes. So it's basically multiple risk factors together which led to the presence of mucormycosis in most patients.
You mentioned that it's an opportunistic infection which causes mucor.
Yes, sir.
So why don't we see it in HIV patients commonly?
So
Any
it is seen.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So it could be seen in immunosuppressed states, could be included, but sir, usually in more full-blown cases like in AIDS, there are cases which have been noted in patients with full-blown HIV/AIDS.
Okay.
But in our study with 50 patients, we did not have any patients with HIV positive state.
What is the most important thing you will monitor when you are giving amphotericin to the patients?
So we check their RFTs are done because
Correct,
it
very
can
good.
affect the kidney. But usually because we use liposomal, which are relatively safer compared to the conventional amphotericin.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Karishma.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karishma. We'll go ahead with the next presentation. It's by Dr. Sanjana. She'll be talking about the case of bilateral superior syndrome. Your time starts, doctor.
Am I audible, sir? Hello?
Very much. Yeah. You are audible.
Okay.
Please start.
Yeah, 1 minute. A very good afternoon to one and all. I am Dr. Sanjana, and I would like to present a case on subperitoneal hematoma, its systemic and ocular manifestations. Okay, so I have no financial interest in the study. Coming to the case report, a 9-year-old male child presented with painful progressive bilateral proptosis, diminution of vision, photophobia, and generalized swelling of the head since 2 weeks. The patient had history of blunt trauma to his head 15 days ago by falling in bathroom and getting hit by a tap. The family history was not significant, and on general examination, the patient was not oriented to time, place, and person. He had multiple bruises over his body. Coming to the clinical examination, the unaided visual acuity in right eye was perception of light and left eye was hand movement close to face. The patient had severe photophobia. Lid showed edema and ecchymosis. The conjunctiva showed congestion and chemosis. Right eye showed signs of exposure keratitis with a 2/1 mm corneal perforation. Left eye also showed signs of exposure keratitis. The extraocular movements were restricted in all gazes, and the orbit had bilateral abaxial proptosis of 4 mm. This is the clinical picture of the child on day 1, that is on the day of admission. You can see there is generalized scalp edema, proptosis. Both eyes show signs of exposure keratitis. The cornea is dry and hazy. There is lid edema, chemosis, and congestion. This is the child after 2 to 3 days, wherein you can see there is increase in the amount of congestion, chemosis. The cornea eventually developed ulcer due to the exposure keratitis. The proptosis is evident on the lateral side. My differential diagnoses were orbital cellulitis, orbital hemorrhage, masquerades like rhabdomyosarcoma, and fungal granuloma. So to come to a conclusion, we did CT scan of the brain and orbit. On coronal section, we can see an isodense blood collection superiorly above the cranium, which is suggestive of subgaleal hematoma. Next was intraorbital subperitoneal hemorrhage bilaterally in the superomedial quadrant. We can also see distortion of the eyeball contour. There was maxillary hemosynous on the right side, and no obvious fracture lines were noted. On the axial and sagittal sections also, we can see there is a large subgaleal hematoma over the entire bony calvarium. There's distortion of the eyeball contour and intraorbital hemorrhage, which caused around proptosis of 24 and 25 mm in both the eyes. So this led us to wonder, like, why did such a trivial trauma cause such a massive hemorrhage in a child? That is when we looked at his lab testing and it revealed an abnormal coagulation profile. The PT-INR was deranged, but the PPTT was normal. The hemoglobin was also low. So this is more suggestive of a factor 7 deficiency. It is a rare autosomal recessive blood clotting disorder which is seen in children. The treatment modality, since it was a clotting factor deficiency, we transfused the child with packed cell volume, fresh frozen plasma, and injectable vitamin K. The plan was to do an orbital decompression surgery, but the child was unfit for general anesthesia. So instead, we did a subperitoneal drainage by 18-gauge needle and syringe. We received around 14 cc of blood from the right eye and 10 cc of blood in the left eye. These are the before and after images where you can see the reduction in proptosis immediately after drainage of the blood. The patient was also started on moxifloxacin, tobramycin, carboxymethylcellulose, and hydromethylcellulose gel. This is the picture of the patient on the day of discharge. We did a B scan, which revealed the posterior segment was within normal limit. So we will go ahead and try his luck for whatever vision we can achieve by doing a penetrating keratoplasty. Multidisciplinary approach is must in such a case. So coming to the discussion part, subperitoneal hematoma is collection of blood between the periosteum and bones of the orbit, whereas subgaleal hematoma is collection of blood between the periosteum and the galea aponeurosis. It constitutes less than 1% of space-occupying lesion in children. The most common cause is facial trauma and a fracture. Less common causes include orbital inflammation, vascular disorders, Valsalva maneuver, disseminated intravascular coagulopathy, and coagulopathy secondary to liver disease. So we did a PubMed database survey. It was done by Buell and Yazisi. Out of the 18 cases which reported of subperitoneal hematoma in children, only 2 of them had a clotting factor deficiency. So ours may be the third case. It shows how rare this case is. So to conclude, patients who develop subperitoneal orbital hemorrhage after minor trauma should always be evaluated for a possible bleeding diathesis. Emergent management is of utmost importance, as any delay between the onset of symptoms and treatment can have a significant effect on the recovery of the vision. These are my references. Thank you.
Good presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Doctor, your patients are pediatric patients only?
Yes, sir. Like we did a study on pediatric patients, sir.
Yeah. But if you, in the treatment, if you drain the blood, is there any chances to recollect the blood over there?
Yes, sir. There are chances to recollect the blood, but then we could see if there is increase in proptosis or if there is increase in head circumference. If the patient, the symptoms were relieved after draining of blood. That's why we know. That's how we know the.
In your patient, have you seen that recollection?
No, sir. There was no recollection in this child because he was immediately also started on fresh frozen plasma, and blood transfusion was done. So it was taken care of.
Good.
Okay. Dr. Sanjana, this was a coagulation deformity, correct?
Yes, sir.
Do you drain all the cases of hematomas? What is the protocol?
Sir, if it's not resolving, then, and if it's causing proptosis, which is significant and hampering the vision, if it will cause compression of the optic nerve, if
Correct.
anything that is threatening the vision, we'll try and remove it.
What is the most common cause for hematomas?
Sir, trauma. If there's a fracture or trauma.
What was the HU value of the bone and hair on the CT here?
Bone is between 250 to 1000 Hounsfield units. Hello, can you hear
Yeah,
me?
yeah.
Hello.
What was the, did you observe in this case? How much was it?
Sir, the blood was 100. The bone was around 800, sir. And there was loss of fat planes, so that was in minus 100, like extraocular muscles and the flat planes that we were comparing.
Okay, nice, good.
Thank you, sir.
This is the next one, I think, Dr. Dhananjay. Are you ready? Dr. Dhananjay? Who is next ready? Yeah.
Hello.
Please start your presentation, Dr. Dhananjay.
Address करून ठेवलं का? 10 मिनिटं आहे. मी Hello. Hello. Dr. Shah. There is
Yes.
no audio. Hello.
Yes, tell me. You are not
There is
audible.
no
Actually.
audio. Yeah. Hello.
Technical person, anyone here?
Yes, doctor.
Can you please check? There is some problem with the audio, doctor.
Audio of Dr. Dhananjay. We are not hearing Dr. Dhananjay.
Dr. Dhananjay's audio is not coming.
Not audible.
Not audible actually.
The video is started now.
Sir, am I audible now?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Now it's
audible. Yeah, yeah.
start, Dr. Dhananjay.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be talking on masquerades of mucormycosis. I have no financial interest in this. As you all know, mucormycosis is an opportunistic fungal infection which was very rare before the era of COVID. During this pandemic, multiple cases of mucormycosis came to OPD. Most of the patients had a history of previous COVID-19 infection, and majority of them were middle-aged group and had uncontrolled blood sugar levels. Most of them, they presented with the features like sinusitis, periorbital pain and edema, external ophthalmoplegia, proptosis, diminution of vision. The diagnosis of mucormycosis is based on clinical, radiological and histopathological thing. The treatment is multidisciplinary, combined approach of ENT, physician and ophthalmologist. I'll be talking about a case who presented to OPD with features like diminution of vision, periorbital swelling, proptosis, congestion, chemosis, and restricted extraocular muscles in all the gauges, the typical presentation of mucormycosis. This patient had no history of COVID-19 infection in the recent past. He was not a known case of diabetes mellitus, but he was a newly diagnosed case of hypertension. The fundus examination of this patient presented with picture of CRVO, and the radiological findings presented with right globe, proptosis, bulky extraocular muscles, mild mucosal thickening of the bilateral ethmoidal and maxillary sinus, which were very much typical of mucormycosis. So we came to the diagnosis of mucormycosis, and the patient was admitted and was started on amphotericin B. After a couple of days, the FET was performed on this patient and specimen was sent for histopathological examination, but the examination came out to be negative for any fungal element. The patient was unfortunately tested to be COVID-19 positive and was shifted to COVID care hospital, where he was started on amphotericin B, steroids and antibiotics. Later, after a week of this treatment, the patient presented, the symptoms of the patient were resolved, clinical picture was resolved, like extraocular muscles were regained. The only thing which did not resolve was the circumciliary congestion. We later did MRI imaging, to look for any cause that we were missing, but MRI came to be inconclusive. Later, a digital subsection angiography was performed, which was suggestive of keratoconus fistula of low grade. Later, a DSA intervention was done and the patient was now doing well. So the conclusion of this was, in this pandemic of mucormycosis, there are many other conditions which clinically presented to be like mucormycosis, but finally the clinico-pathological correlation helps to come to the diagnosis of this case. Thank you.
Very good presentation, Dr. Dhananjay.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Dr. Dhananjay.
Yes, sir.
Which other conditions where you get the signs like mucormycosis?
So clinically, orbital cellulitis, acute necrocystitis might present like a clinical case of mucormycosis.
Okay.
Dr. Dhananjay,
Yes, sir.
here you said that you had to give steroids to the patient.
Yes.
So may I know why did you give steroids to this patient when you had diagnosed earlier as a mucormycosis?
So as we were suspect, the patient turned out to be COVID positive. So one of the protocol in these patients were to give COVID to reduce the inflammatory, to give steroids to reduce the inflammatory.
But it is more of an infective etiology that your patient had than inflammatory in this case. Can you tell us what were the CRP and the ESR in this case before you started with the steroids?
So CRP was 103.
Okay. Fine. Any questions from Pankaj sir?
You have done the job, Sumit. No problem. We can go to next.
Thank
Good
you.
afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon, madam.
Thank you so much to
Good
all the
afternoon.
judges, the moderators, and all the participants. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi,
Thank you.
Sanjay
Thank you,
Dada.
ma'am,
Thank
for
you.
the opportunity.
Very nice to see you. Jai Shri Ram.
Okay.
So next is Dr. Abhijit in presentation. Dr. Abhijit, can you please share your screen?
Is it visible, sir?
Yeah, but we are on the last slide. Can you go to the first slide and make it full screen, please?
Should I start?
Yes, please.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
I am
Abhijit.
presenting. Yes, sir.
Continue.
Yes, sir. I am presenting a case report of a rhino-orbital mucormycosis in a COVID-19 patient under the guidance of Dr. Shubha ma'am, Dr. Varshan Andedkar ma'am, Dr. Suraj Kumar Kuri sir. I have no financial interest in the presentation. Introduction. As the COVID pandemic is going on, we have met another devastating disease of mucormycosis, which is encountered by physicians, ENT surgeons, and ophthalmic surgeons. So, prior to COVID-19 pandemic, the incidence of the mucormycosis is low, but now it has gone to the 10 to 13%, in which the fungal component is 10 times more commoner. In which the mucormycosis belongs to Zygomycosis family mucorous specimen, which causes angio invasion, and the prevalence is 0.14 per thousand, which is about 80 times higher than the non-developed countries. Clinical presentation: the 50-year-old female patient diagnosed with COVID-19 disease and was admitted in COVID wards since 30 days, on oxygen since 20 days, started with complaints of swelling over the left eye since 15 days, facial pain swelling over the left half of the face since 15 days, protrusion of the eyeball since 10 days, diminution since 10 days. Patient is known case of hypertension since 10 years and recently diagnosed as a case of diabetes mellitus. This is the first encounter of the patient, showing restriction of the extraocular movements in the left eye, with complete restriction in infraduction and abduction, with partial restriction in adduction of the left eye. These are the preoperative images. The first image shows the patient's complaint of periorbital swelling with ptosis. Then the patient was admitted as patient is admitted in COVID ward. Patient has was on treatment with COVID protocols and is on steroid. So the mucormycosis disease has progressed to such an extent that the patient had severe ptosis of 26 millimeter with severe conjunctival chemosis and ptosis. But there is no exposure criteria set up in the patient's eye. Then we have given the 3 doses of transcutaneous retrobulbar injection of amphotericin B for alternate day. 3 doses given with the dose of 3.5 milligram per ml with preceding anesthetic injection retrobulbar. Then patient after 7 days has regressed proptosis and regressed chemosis with diminution in the periorbital edema, but the extraocular movements and the vision of the patient is not regained. So the patient was gone for investigation and diagnosis. The patient was positive for RT-PCR on 18th of the May of 2021. The CBC reports were normal. Fasting blood sugar level were 170. Postprandial were 276. HbA1c was 7.3. Serum interleukins were 637.93. CRP 17.84. D-dimer was 460. As a suspect of mucormycosis, we have sent the KOH mount, which was suggestive of mucormycosis. Then we send the patient's serum electrolyte samples which were normal. ECG was normal, and enhanced MRI, brain orbit, and paranasal sinus suggestive of rhino-orbital mucormycosis. There was no intracranial extension. This is the MRI of the patient, which shows the extension of the mucormycosis in the nasal cavity, paranasal sinuses involving maxillary, ethmoid, and sphenoid sinus, breach in the medial orbital wall, and the infection has reached the orbital area, causing the proptosis of the left eye. So the management of the patient was done with the COVID-19 protocol, including steroid. It is the prior steroid was given prior to the suspicion of mucormycosis. Then the control of the diabetes and diabetic ketoacidosis with injection insulin. After suspecting the mucormycosis, we have stopped the steroidal drugs. Then we have started the injection liposomal amphotericin B 5 mg per kg given in divided doses for 20 days. After doing the serum electrolyte, RFT, and ECG. Then we have started the posaconazole syrup, 5 milliliter TDS, along with the amphotericin B. And as I have already said, that process of tram already given to the patient. The surgical management done in this patient is left-sided functional endoscopic sinus surgery, done with medial wall and inferior wall decompression on the 18th day of admission. Orbital excitation surgery with amphotericin B lavage is done in the same setting. The debrided mucosa and orbital content were sent to culture sensitivity histopathology reporting, which were confirmed the diagnosis of mucormycosis. This is the orbital excitation, lead spring orbital excitation done in this patient. And this sample was sent to the pathology and culture sensitivity report. To discuss
Hello.
I think he lost the connection, sir.
Yeah.
He had almost done with the presentation. Question answers are pending. I think as soon as he joins back, we'll get back to the questions. So since we are running out of time, we'll run to the next presentation. Next presenter is Dr. Neha Chaudhary. Dr. Neha, you're there?
Yes, sir. Yes,
Can you please share your slides? Shubha ma'am, Abhijit just lost its connection.
Yeah, I'm checking what he's doing.
Yeah, yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah.
Make it full screen and start presenting. We can see your slide, Dr. Neha.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Neha, we lost you there. Dr. Neha, are you here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, please
Can
share
you see the
screen.
presentation?
No, now it's a blank screen. Yeah, now we can see. Please start. Yeah.
So good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Neha Chaudhary, and I'll be talking about the incidence of ophthalmic manifestations in patients of post-COVID-19 mucormycosis at a tertiary care center. To start with, there are increasing case reports of rhino-orbital mucormycosis in people with coronavirus disease, especially in India. It is an emerging angio-invasive infection causing tissue infarction and necrosis caused by the ubiquitous filamentous fungi of the order Mucorales and the class of Mucormycetes. Cerebro-rhino-orbital mucormycosis is the type that most frequently involves the structure of the head and neck. The prevalence of ophthalmic manifestations among COVID-19 patients ranges from 2 to 32%, with the most common being mucormycosis. The aim of the current study was to determine the incidence of ophthalmic manifestations in patients diagnosed with post-COVID-19 mucormycosis. The study was a cross-sectional observational study Department of Ophthalmology of a medical college and hospital for a period of 1 month, that is the month of May 2021. 25 diagnosed patients of post-COVID-19 mucormycosis who visited the ophthalmology OPD of the tertiary care center were enrolled in the study. The inclusion criteria for selection of the patient was a KOH swab positive for fungal elements, which is suggestive of mucormycosis, and a history of oropharyngeal swab positive on RT-PCR, that is a history of COVID-19. And the exclusion criteria being pre-existing ophthalmic complaints, pre-existing retinal disorders or surgery, and pre-existing ophthalmoplegia. All the participants who were enrolled in the study underwent a comprehensive ocular examination. The assessment included a detailed history, visual acuity assessment, the ocular examination, slit lamp examination, and fundus examination. Following lab investigations were also noted. That was the RT-PCR report, the KOH swab report, CT-PNS, MRI brain plus orbit. Based on the study, out of the 25 enrolled patients in the study, 9 patients had ocular manifestations, of which 5 had total ophthalmoplegia, 1 presented as a corneal ulcer, 1 as ptosis, 1 as a CRAO, and 1 as fungal endophthalmitis. The remaining 16 patients had maxillary and or ethmoidal sinusitis, but no ophthalmic manifestations at present. They were observed for the development of any signs of ocular involvement. So based on the results, the incidence of the ophthalmic manifestations in patients of mucormycosis was found to be about 36%. So this is a brief summary of all the presentations, various presentations of the patient. So as we can see, the second patient presented as diminution of vision and watering, and on anterior segment examination was found to have a dendritic corneal ulcer. Whereas in patient number 4, the patient had drooping of right eyelid since 8 days and diminution of vision. The patient had mild ptosis and also had an immature senile cataract. So as such, the visual acuity was not hampered and the fundus was also normal. If we see the patient number 6, the patient presented to us as loss of vision since 8 days, and at presentation, the patient was PL negative. He had a fixed dilated pupil, clear lens, a streak hypopyon, and a 270 degrees posterior synecdoche. All the extraocular movements were present in the patient, but the fundus showed a yellow fundal glow, and dense vitritis and exudates were present. The patient was diagnosed to have endophthalmitis. In patient number 9, if we see, the patient presented to us as sudden diminution of vision and was PL negative at the time of presentation. He had a fixed dilated pupil and clear lens, and on fundus examination was found to have a central retinal artery occlusion. All the remaining patients presented as severe ptosis, fixed mid-dilated pupils with the total ophthalmoplegia, that is internal and external ophthalmoplegia. The visual acuity was either PL positive or severely reduced. So this is a pie chart which shows the results. So as we can see, about 56% is contributed by ophthalmoplegia, whereas CRAO, corneal ulcer, endophthalmitis, and ptosis contribute about 11% each. Based on all of this, the incidence was calculated to be about around 36%. These are the clinical photographs of ophthalmoplegia. As we can see, all of the patients have severe ptosis. They also had proptosis and total ophthalmoplegia. In figure number 2, we also can see a necrotic eschar present over the lip of the patient. These are the pictures which show the corneal ulcer. Now, the corneal ulcer was an accidental, incidental finding. The patient had come to the OPD for complaints of diminution of vision, and on anterior segment examination, we found the patient to have a dendritic corneal ulcer. And on further investigation, the patient was also found to be KOH positive for mucormycosis, and he had a history of COVID-19 infection. The second picture, that is the endophthalmitis. The patient presented as sudden loss of vision and had no history of recent intraocular surgery or intraocular injection. On examination, the patient was found to have endophthalmitis, and since no extraocular manipulations were present, so he was diagnosed to be endogenous endophthalmitis, and the vitreous tube came out to be positive for fungal elements. So the final diagnosis was fungal endogenous endophthalmitis. The last patient presented to us as only mild ptosis, which she had noticed around 8 days back. And on further investigation, she was also found to be positive for KOH positive for mucormycosis. Now, this patient presented to us as a sudden loss of vision and was PL negative at the time of presentation. On fundus examination, he was found to have a central retinal artery occlusion in the left eye, as we can see from the fundoscopic image. These are the various reports, the MRI and KOH reports. We also can see the radiological images here. In the radiological images, we can see proptosis and soft tissue swellings in the right eye of the patient. The incidence rate of mucormycosis globally varies from 0.005 to 1.7 per million population, whereas in India it is 0.1 per 1,000 population, which is 80 times more. So the orbital involvement presents as chemosis, periorbital cellulitis, infraorbital anesthesia, proptosis, and ophthalmoplegia. The limitations of the study was that the sample size is small, hence we require a larger scale study to confirm our findings. And development of unilateral facial or orbital pain, headache, periocular swelling, or double vision should prompt COVID-19 patients of mucormycosis to seek immediate medical attention. Thank you.
Good, Neha. Dr. Neha, it is good presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Presentation.
Dr. Neha,
Yes, sir.
why incidence in India was more as compared to other countries? 80 times more.
Twice.
So because the irrational use of steroids in case of COVID-19 patients was seen to be more, and hence the incidence of mucor and ophthalmic manifestations was found to be more.
Or is it because of diabetes mellitus more incidence?
So it is both. Diabetes also being having a higher incidence in Indian population, and also due to the use of steroids for the treatment of COVID-19 infection.
Both factors. Okay.
Any questions, Pankaj sir? No. Okay, fine. We had left with the questions
Thank
for
you,
Dr. Abhijit. Dr. Abhijit is back
Yes,
here.
yes. Yes.
Sanjay sir, Pakre sir, Pankaj sir, any questions for Dr. Abhijit? He just presented a case of mucormycosis post-COVID. Abhijit, you don't have to
Dr.
share
Abhijit.
this. We're done with the presentation, correct? Anything left
sir.
you want to show us?
3 slides are left, sir.
Good afternoon,
Okay.
Dr. Pakre sir, Vaidya sir.
Good afternoon.
Good
madam.
afternoon, ma'am.
Good
Good
afternoon, ma'am.
afternoon, Abhijit sir, Ashwin Vaidya sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Kalge sir, thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pakre sir.
you.
Pranam.
Pranam.
Came
Mask में हो.
Came che, madam. Hello.
Madam, you are mute.
Madam is muted.
Acha, okay. So,
Okay. Hi. Hello. I am sorry to disturb. I just wanted to wish everybody.
madam came.
Yeah, you go.
Okay.
Hello.
Dr.
So I think we can finish question and answers with Dr. Abhijit. Any questions from the judges for his case?
Sir, I have 3 slides left, sir. That I.
Okay, fine. You can just go ahead.
So, sorry for the disturbance. I have lost my connection. Coming to the discussion, during the current scenario of COVID-19 pandemic in India, the increased fungal infection, predominantly the rhino-orbital mucormycosis, has been documented. Mucormycosis is a rare opportunistic fungal infection, which is angio-invasive, aggressive, causing rhino-orbital mucormycosis, involving paranasal sinus orbits, and may extend to the cerebral parenchyma. As mucormycosis shows vascular tropism, damages the endothelium lead to the ischemic necrosis of the ophthalmic artery, bones, nerves, which may lead to orbital apex syndrome. And the infection may spread to the cavernous sinus to the ophthalmic vein. Another route of spread is direct route by bony erosion of the medial or inferior orbital walls. Pterygopoid and fossa being the arbor place of the mucormycosis, through which intracranial extension occurs. The most important predisposing factor for the mucormycosis is uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, immunocompromised status, systemic use of corticosteroids. Yes, sir.
Abhijit, can you just sum up quickly?
Yes, sir. MRI is the most important diagnostic. Gadolinium MRI is the most important diagnostic tool. Extension is to the orbital compartment, face, or intracranial part. To conclude, rhino-orbital mucormycosis is an aggressive necrotic disease involving paranasal sinuses, orbits, with or without cerebral extension.
which should be treated aggressively with antifungal. That may be IV, intravenous, transcutaneous, retrovalvular amphotericin B, oral or local treatment with surgical intervention. Surgical intervention like orbital exentration, infrared debridement along with the face helps in preventing the intracranial extension of the disease, thus reduces the mortality. To sum up, the most important prophylactic factor is the judicial use of the steroid and immunosuppressant during the treatment of the COVID. We have treated 352 patients of the mucormycosis, out of which we have given 53 transcutaneous retrovalvular amphotericin B, in which 15 patients shows recurrence. In surgical intervention, almost 17 patients we have treated, but only single patient showed the recurrence. So the surgical treatment is more beneficial to save the life of the patient and to prevent the intracranial extension of the disease. These are my references. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Abhijit. Any questions from the judges?
Yes, sir.
Nice presentation. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right.
Dr. Abhijit?
So,
Yes, sir.
Why liposomal amphotericin is preferred?
Sir, as conventional liposomal amphotericin B has devastating effect on the urinary function and kidneys. So, and the serum bioavailability of the liposomal amphotericin B is much more than the conventional amphotericin B. So, it is preferred over the conventional amphotericin B. And we can give the we can give 5 to 7 milligrams of liposomal amphotericin B, where we have to give only 1 to 3 milligrams of conventional amphotericin B to prevent the toxicity.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Any questions, Takalkar sir? We are running short, I think. Next session has.
So should I announce the session, sir? With the permission of the faculty and judges?
Yes.
So thank you, Takalkar sir, Pakre sir, and Pankaj Shah sir for being here, and all the speakers for presenting their papers. I request all the judges to send the final mark list to me so we can tabulate the result. And I hand over the session for the next 3 paper thing to Dr. Darshana